Angels in My Hair by Lorna Byrne. Read by Maureen O'Brien. Chapter 1. Through Different Eyes. When I was 2 years old, the doctor told my mother I was retarded. As a baby, my mother noticed that I always seemed to be in a world of my own. I can even remember lying in a cot, a big basket, and seeing my mother bending over me. Surrounding my mother, I saw wonderful, bright, shiny beings in all the colours of the rainbow. They were much bigger than I was, but smaller than her, about the size of a 3-year-old child. These beings floated in the air like feathers, and I remember reaching out to touch them, but I never succeeded. I was fascinated by these creatures with their beautiful lights. At that time, I didn't understand that I was seeing anything different to what other people saw. It was to be much later that I learned from them that they were called angels. As the months passed, my mother noticed that I'd always be looking or staring somewhere else, no matter what she'd do to try to get my attention. In truth, I was somewhere else. I was away with the angels, watching what they were doing and talking and playing with them. I was enthralled. I was a late talker, but I had been conversing with angels from very early on. Sometimes we used words as you and I understand them, but sometimes no words were needed. We would know each other's thoughts. I believed that everyone else could see what I saw. But then the angels told me not to say anything to anyone about seeing them, and that I should keep it a secret between us. In fact, for many years I listened to the angels, and I didn't tell people what I saw. It is only now, while writing this book, that I am telling much of what I have seen for the first time. The doctor's comment, when I was just 2, was to have a profound effect on my life. I realized that people can be very cruel. At the time, we lived in Old Kilmainham, near to the centre of Dublin. My father rented a little bicycle repair shop there, which had a cottage attached. If you walked through the shop and around to the left, you would come to a tiny and fairly dilapidated house. It was part of a row of old cottages and shops, but most of them were empty or abandoned because they were in such bad condition. For much of the time we lived in the one little room downstairs. Here we cooked, ate, talked, played, and even washed in a big metal basin in front of the fire. Although the house had no bathroom, outside in the back garden, down a little path, was a shed with a loo. Upstairs there were 2 small bedrooms. At first I shared one of the bedrooms and a bed with my older sister Emer. It wasn't just angels I was seeing, and I saw them constantly from the moment I woke up until I went to sleep, but also the spirits of people who had died. My brother, Christopher, had been born long before me, but he had died when he was only about 10 weeks old. Although I never saw him while he was alive, I could visualize him. He was dark-haired, while my sister and myself were fair, and I could also play with him, in spirit. At the time, I thought there was nothing strange about this. It felt as if he was just another child, although he seemed a little brighter in appearance. One of the first things that made me realize that he was different, though, was that his age could change. Sometimes he appeared as a baby, but other times he looked about the same age as me, toddling across the floor. He wasn't there constantly either, but seemed to come and go. Late on one cold winter afternoon, just as it was getting dark, I was alone in the little living room of the house in Old Kilmainham. There was fire in the open fireplace, which was the only light in the room. The firelight flickered across the floor, where I was sitting, playing with little wooden blocks that my father had made. Christopher came.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?